Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are attempting something that, well, honestly, it feels a little bit illegal.
Or at least intellectually reckless, right?
Exactly. We're looking at this stack of research that claims there's a hidden architecture, like a hidden underlying pattern.
A pattern that connects completely disparate fields. I mean, things that we normally keep in very separate boxes.
Right. I'm talking about a structural pattern that is identical whether you are, say, coding a recursive AI algorithm, trying to fix a broken corporate culture, or, and you have to stick with me here, trying to manifest a new career.
It's a fascinating and a very bold proposition. Usually we keep these worlds rigidly separate. You have the hard sciences, systems, engineering, mathematics, signal processing over here in the serious pile.
The real stuff.
The real stuff, exactly. And then you have the human experiences, psychology, leadership, even spirituality over there in the soft pile. But today's source material, it argues that the structure of how things transform is actually the same in both places.
That's the whole premise. We are looking at the work of DLGK. And the idea is that there is this recursive pattern, a specific rhythm that shapes reality. If you get the rhythm right, systems evolve.
And if you get it wrong, they crash.
They crash. And it doesn't matter if the system is a neural network or, your own nervous system.
And to get there, we have quite the source stack today. It's a really unique blend. We're pulling from a mathematical paper called ATI, an ordered operator decomposition, a symbolic framework known as the TRISIGIL. Then there's a paper on symbolic systems engineering, or SSE, and finally a book called Colliding Manifestations.
It sounds like a lot, I know. It really does. You've got this rigorous math on one side and then manifestation on the other. It looks like someone dropped a calculus textbook into the New Age section of a bookstore and then just shuffled all the pages together.
Yeah, it does seem that way on the surface. But the mission today is to show how they are actually talking about the same core engine. The goal is to move us from either, magical thinking or just pure rigid logic into what we're calling a unified systems thinking view.
Okay. And to do that, we're going to approach this deep dive in a really specific way, right?
Yes, for every single concept we introduce, we're going to do two passes. First, what we're calling the structural pass. This is for the logicians, the engineers, the AI researchers, the people who want to know how the machine actually works.
So signals, fields, operators, the hard mechanics of it.
Exactly. And then, right after, we'll do the experiential pass. This is for the creatives, the leaders, the people trying to figure out why their team is burning out or why their life feels stuck. We're going to translate that math into stories, emotions, and practical reality.
It's a translation project, really.
That's a perfect way to put it. I think by the end, you'll see that the language of math and the language of meaning are just different dialects describing the exact same engine.
I love that. Before we jumped in, just a quick note on the terminology again. The author is DLGK, and the central symbol we'll keep coming back to is the TRISIGIL. So if you hear us say that, you know what we're referring to.
So shall we begin with the core architecture, the foundation of all of this?
Let's do it. Part one, the core triad. What is this engine? What drives this machine?
So at the very heart of DLGK's work is this idea of a recursive update map. In the ATI paper, this is expressed mathematically as a function. F equals I circle T circle A.
Okay, let's unpack that immediately. I circle T circle A. For those of us who haven't done operator theory since college or, ever, what are we looking at?
Yeah, that little open circle is key. It means composed with. It's a way of indicating the order of operations. But here is the trap, and it's a big one. In standard mathematical notation like this, you read it right to left.
Right to left. Okay, so even though it's written ITA, the process actually starts with A.
Correct. First, the system applies A, then it applies T, and only then does it apply I. The paper defines these as alignment A, threshold T, and continuation or integration I.
Alignment, threshold, continuation. Got it.
Precisely. Let's do the structural pass first. Just stick with the math. In the paper, alignment A is described as an operator that maps a state to a regularized representation.
Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
Think of it as preparation. Before you can process data, you have to clean it, you have to orient it, make sure it's in the right format. It's all about minimizing noise so the actual signal is clear. If you have a vector, an arrow pointing in some random direction, alignment is the step that rotates it so it faces the correct way for the system to read it.
So it's basically data cleaning. It's getting the raw material ready to be used by the machine.
Exactly. Then comes threshold T. This is the constraint operator. In the paper, it's often described as a projection onto a set.
A projection?
Yeah, think of it like a filter. It enforces feasibility. It asks the question, is this point actually allowed to exist in the target reality? And if the answer is no, it corrects it. It literally projects the point onto the nearest valid spot, usually the boundary of what's allowed.
It's the bouncer at the club.
It is absolutely the bouncer. It makes sure that the state doesn't violate the fundamental rules of the system. And finally, after all that, you get to continuation. This is the propagation step.
The movement.
The movement. It's often an integration or a translation. It moves the state forward into the next time step. It takes that aligned, constrained, validated signal and pushes it into the future.
So structurally, the machine has to do three things. In order, it aligns, then it filters, then it moves.
Yes. And the big aha moment in the ATI paper is that most system failures, whether in code or in, well, anything, they come from conflating these roles.
What do you mean by conflating?
We try to move to integrate before we've aligned. Or we try to constrain the system without giving it a way to move forward. The math shows that if you don't separate these very distinct functional roles, the analysis becomes totally opaque. You can't figure out why your system is breaking because you're treating preparation, constraint, and movement as one big messy blob.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
If you try to drive the car, that's the movement. Before you put it in gear, that's alignment. And open the garage door, the threshold, you're going to have a very, very expensive accident.
That's a perfect analogy. You have to respect the distinct function of each operator and the sequence. Now, let's pivot. Let's do the experiential pass. This is where the TRISIGIL comes in. In Guikke's symbolic work, this same mathematical formula is represented by a symbol. 3 dots in a triangle, a vertical dashed line, and an infinity loop.
Okay, so let's visualize that. 3 dots, which looks just like the therefore symbol in logic, then a dashed vertical line, which looks kind of like a gate or a barrier, and then the infinity loop.
Exactly. So in the symbolic language, alignment is the 3 dots. D.L. Guikke writes that this isn't just getting ready in a casual sense. It's connected to the logical, therefore. It implies a state of logical and internal coherence. It's like saying, because these conditions are met, therefore we can now proceed.
So in human terms, this is about internal consistency. It's asking, are my thoughts, my emotions, and my actions all pointing in the same direction?
Precisely. It's not a vague hope, it's a resolved stance. Then you have the threshold, which is the vertical dashed line.
The gate.
The gate. And notice it's dashed, not a solid wall. It's permeable. In the experiential context, the threshold isn't an obstacle that's just there to block your path. It's a filter that creates definition. It's the no that defines your yes.
Like a constraint that creates the form.
Exactly. You can't write a sonnet without the constraint of the 14-line structure. You can't build a house without the constraint of gravity. The threshold is where your shapeless idea meets the necessary friction of reality and gets its form.
And what about the last part, the infinity symbol?
That's the loop. But here's the key. In the TRISIGIL text, it explicitly says this does not mean endless growth in a linear way. It means non-closure. It means the process doesn't just stop at a finish line. It feeds back into the beginning. It's a cycle. You align, you pass the threshold, you continue. And that act of continuing brings you right back to a new, more informed alignment.
So structurally, this is an ordered operator decomposition. In human terms, DLGK describes this as the rhythm of how we change without falling apart.
That's such a beautiful and accurate way to put it. It's the structure of sustainable evolution.
Okay, let's go deeper on that first step because it feels like the one people want to skip. Alignment. The 3 dots. Why is this so critical? Why can't I just start moving towards my goal?
Let's do the structural pass. The ATI paper talks about a concept from mathematics called Lipschitz continuity.
Oh boy, Lipschitz. Okay, keep it simple for us.
I will. Ideally, it simply means, does the input map smoothly to the output? You change the input just a tiny bit. Does the output explode chaotically, or does it shift in a predictable, stable way? Alignment is the process of ensuring that stability.
So it's about making the system predictable.
Exactly. And in the symbolic systems engineering, SSE paper, they discuss how symbols work by reducing degrees of freedom. Alignment is essentially about achieving signal fidelity. You are reducing all the internal noise in the system so that the actual signal is readable by the next operator, the threshold.
So if I'm coding an AI, this is data cleaning. This is regularization. This is making sure all my data points are scaled.
You cannot train a model on garbage data. It's the first rule. If the data is noisy, if it's contradictory, the model hallucinates. It makes things up. You have to align the data first. You have to make it coherent.
Okay, now let's switch. The experiential pass. This brings us right to the book Colliding Manifestations. Here, the author defines intention not as a wish, but as the signal.
This is such a crucial reframe. Usually we think of intention as a wish or a hope. I hope I get that promotion. But Gike argues it's a broadcast. It's a wave you are emitting. It has a frequency, an amplitude, a structure. And alignment here is about the coherence of that signal.
So it's not about how badly you want something.
No, it's about the lack of contradiction in the signal you're sending out.
The text mentions internal archetypes
Mm-hmm.
as a source of that contradiction. Can we talk about that? Because I found that part fascinating.
Yes. It's the idea that your signal is not just your conscious thought. It includes your subconscious identity, your deepest held beliefs. For example, you might consciously be broadcasting the signal for a promotion or a new healthy relationship. That's the surface signal.
That's the therefore. I am qualified, therefore I should be promoted.
Exactly. But if your underlying unexamined archetype is, say, the martyr who believes they must suffer, or the invisible one who believes it's dangerous to be seen, well, now you have a structural contradiction.
So I'm sending a signal that says promote me, but my entire nervous system is screaming, if I'm seen, I'll be attacked.
Precisely. You are broadcasting look at me and don't look at me at the exact same time. Structurally, that is an incredibly noisy signal. It lacks that Lipschitz continuity we were talking about. It's fundamentally unstable. The waves cancel each other out.
So the signal is fragmented. It's just static.
It's static. And the system, whether that's your boss's brain, a corporate hierarchy, or in the context of the book, the field, it cannot process a contradictory signal. It doesn't know what to do with it. So it just registers as noise and gets ignored. Or worse, the system mirrors the chaos of the signal back to you.
The source also references the HeartMath research here to ground it physically.
Yes, exactly, to show this isn't just a metaphor. HeartMath studies show that emotional states like gratitude, appreciation, or calm create a measurable, coherent heart rhythm pattern. It physically stabilizes the electromagnetic field generated by the heart, which is the most powerful in the body. So when D.L. Gike talks about alignment, it's about physically and symbolically stabilizing your broadcast.
So if you're coming from AI, think of this as data regularization before training. If you're coming from manifestation or personal growth, this shows up as that classic advice to feel it real or achieve emotional coherence without that nagging internal conflict.
Precisely. You cannot move. You cannot integrate until you are coherent, until you are aligned. The first step is non-negotiable.
Which brings us to the second step.
Yeah.
And the source material is incredibly specific about this, the threshold. And more importantly, why the order of operations is so critical. Why can't I just move first and then along later?
This is my favorite part of the ATI paper because it uses rigorous mathematics to prove a profound life lesson. The structural pass here focuses on what's called order sensitivity, or more technically, non-commutativity.
Right. The paper has a specific finite dimensional counterexample. Can you walk us through that, but keep it visual for us?
I'll try. So imagine a 2D plane, like a piece of graph paper. You have a point on that paper, that's your current state. You have 3 operations you can perform.
Okay.
First, you have an alignment operator, A, which in this example rotates the point 90 degrees. Then you have a threshold operator, T, which is a projection onto a flat line. Think of it as flattening the point straight down onto the horizon. The horizon represents the set of rules or valid states. And finally, you have a continuation operator, I, which simply moves the point up by 1 unit.
Okay, so you can rotate, flatten, or move up.
Exactly. The paper then compares 2 different sequences. Scenario 1 is the ATI order. You apply the threshold, then you apply the integration. So you flatten the point to the horizon, making sure it follows the rule, and then you move it up.
Okay, that seems logical. What's the other scenario?
Scenario 2 reverses that last part. You move it up before you flatten it. So you move it up 1 unit into this aspirational space, and then you try to apply the rule by flattening it.
And what's the result? What's the difference?
It's night and day. In scenario 1, the ATI order, the point converges beautifully. It stays favorable. It lands where it's supposed to, within the rules. In scenario 2, where you move before you flatten, the math proves that the process converges to an infeasible point.
Wait, what does that mean? An infeasible point?
It means it lands outside the constraint set. It ends up in a place that cannot exist within the rules of the system. You have literally broken the geometry of the space.
So just by doing the right things in the wrong order, you end up in a reality that doesn't work.
You end up in a reality that is mathematically infeasible. It proves that these operations are non-commutative. You can't just swap them around like you're adding numbers. You must constrain the state before you propagate it into the future.
That is genuinely wild. The math proves it.
It proves it. Now, let's do the experiential pass for this. The threshold. How does this feel in human life?
Yeah, what does an infeasible point feel like?
In human terms, the threshold often feels like a no. It feels like a delay, a rejection. You want the job, you put in the work, but you don't get it. You want the project to launch, but the budget gets cut. That's the threshold.
And we hate that. We see it as failure.
Of course, but in Colliding Manifestations, Gike argues that this isn't failure at all. It is the system intelligently enforcing a threshold to preserve your coherence. The text says, without the threshold, systems expand into noise.
Like a river without banks.
That's the perfect metaphor. A river without banks is just a swamp. It has no direction, no power. The banks, the constraints, are what give the river its force and its identity. We are culturally obsessed with limitless potential, but structurally, without that vertical line of the threshold, we lose definition. We just saturate into noise.
So when the math says you converge to an infeasible point, experientially, that feels like, what, trying to grow a business before you have a business plan?
Exactly. It feels like burnout. It feels like getting the promotion and then imploding because you didn't have the internal structures, the thresholds to handle the new level of pressure. It feels like getting the timing wrong. Structurally, it's just non-commutative operator composition. You trying to integrate before you thresholded.
I love that. I'm not a mess. I just have a non-commutative operator error.
It sounds a lot better, doesn't it? It depersonalizes it. You aren't bad or unworthy. You just got the sequence wrong. You tried to skip the gate in the system to protect itself, and you said, nope, not yet.
Structurally, what's happening is non-commutative operator composition. In human terms, this feels like getting the timing wrong, like trying to expand before you've stabilized.
That's it, exactly. And the threshold is the hardest part for people to accept. We love alignment. That feels good. We love continuation. That feels like progress. But the threshold requires a kind of submission to a constraint.
GK makes the point that this constraint is a form of intelligence.
A profound form of intelligence. The constraint isn't just stopping you, it's shaping you. It's projecting you onto the feasible set where real, sustainable success is actually possible.
Okay, so we've aligned. We've been shaped by the threshold. Now we hit the loop. Infinity, continuation. What happens here?
Right. So structural paths. The taper defines recursion very simply as return with memory. The formula is elegant. The output of the last cycle becomes the input for the next cycle.
Feeds back on itself.
Yes, and the TRISIGIL text is very, very clear on this. The cycle doesn't end, it re-enters. And this brings us to the symbolic systems engineering paper, which makes a really important point about feedback loops in human systems. Positive feedback reinforces symbols and their meaning. Negative feedback erodes them. If the meaning doesn't update, if the loop is broken or ignored, we get what the paper calls ritualization.
Ritualization. What does that look like structurally?
Structurally, it looks like executing a piece of code that no longer points to a valid memory address. You are doing the motions, you're doing your alignment, you're hitting a threshold, you're moving, but the information, the meaning inside the system hasn't updated. You're just going through the motions.
That leads perfectly into the experiential pass, the spiral. The text asks that really common human question. Why do I keep facing the same problems over and over again?
And the answer from this framework is, you aren't. It's not repetition, it's recursion. You are meeting the same structural problem, but you are meeting it with more data. You're meeting it at a different level of the spiral. You aren't the same person who faced this issue last time. You've learned something.
DLGK writes that infinity is not a finish line, but a refusal to close.
That is such a profound shift in mindset for most of us. We are obsessed with arrival. We want to get to the fixed point and then just stop. I want to get rich and then relax. I want to get the perfect job and then I'm done. But living systems don't stop. If they stop evolving, they die. So your identity isn't a fixed point, it's a trajectory. You are a motion, not a statue.
So if you're coming from systems theory, this is the feedback loop. If you're coming from personal growth, this is that realization that you never actually arrive. You just deepen your understanding.
Precisely. The cycle protects you from stagnation. It forces you to realign, to reevaluate every single time. It's the engine of growth.
I want to shift gears slightly now to the symbolic systems engineering SSE paper. We've talked about this internal individual process. Now let's talk about how symbols actually run the machine, especially in an organization or a society.
Yes. This is where we get into the invisible architecture that governs our collective lives. The SSE framework argues that symbols, words like innovation, KPIs, job titles, cultural rituals, they aren't just decorative labels we slap on things, they are operational constraints.
Okay, structural pass on SSE. What does it mean for a word to be an operational constraint?
Well, think of a hard constraint, like a physical wall. You cannot walk through it. A soft constraint, on the other hand, is a symbol, a sign that says do not enter. Physically, you can walk past it. There's no wall. But the symbol, the meaning, it reweights the probabilities. It makes the act of walking past it structurally improbable for most agents in that system.
So symbols literally engineer behavior by shifting probabilities.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. The paper talks about saturation and symbolic load. Every system, every organization has a finite interpretive bandwidth. If you flood a system with too many symbols, too many rules, too many values of a month, too many conflicting KPIs, that bandwidth gets completely overwhelmed.
And what happens when the bandwidth is full?
The system collapses into noise, the constraints stop working, people start ignoring the signs because there are too many of them. The paper calls this symbolic inflation. When a government prints too much money, the currency becomes worthless. When a company prints too many symbols, meaning becomes worthless.
And the experiential pass for this feels like every corporate job I've ever had.
It's incredibly common. When leadership puts posters of innovation and risk-taking on the wall, but the bonus structure, which is the real functional threshold rewards safety and cost-cutting, you have a symbolic collision. You have an incredibly high symbolic load and zero coherence.
The result of that is cynicism.
Cynicism, that's the word. And cynicism isn't an attitude problem. It's a structural response to symbolic saturation. It's the human brain logically saying, the signal-to-noise ratio here is too low. The words don't mean anything. I'm tuning out to conserve energy.
And the solution the paper suggests isn't more symbols, but symbolic compression.
Yes. You need fewer, more potent symbols, like the TRISIGIL itself. You need to pack more coherent meaning into fewer symbols, reduce the load, clarify the signal. Less rules, more coherent and embodied meaning.
Interpretive drift was another term in there that really stuck out to me.
That's a crucial one for long-term systems. That's when the symbol, the word, or the ritual stays the same, but the shared meaning decays over time. The flag is still flying, but no one remembers what country it represents. Structural maintenance requires constantly refreshing that meaning, running the alignment loop again and again for the organization.
So structurally, this is about the signal-to-noise ratio in a constraint network. In human terms, this feels like burnout or cynicism when leadership's words no longer match the lived reality.
That's it in a nutshell. And the fix isn't a better attitude workshop. It's better, more coherent engineering of the symbols themselves.
Okay, let's move to the final piece of this incredible stack, colliding manifestations. This takes everything we've just talked about, the recursive map, the symbolic constraints, and applies it to the shared field. This is the part that finally answers the question, okay, what if I do everything right? I align, I accept the threshold. Why does it still sometimes go wrong?
This is the critical transition from the individual to the collective. This is where interaction and interference come into play, so the structural pass. The source material on recursive field dynamics defines the shared field, which it calls phi, as a set of all active signals in a given space. So the key takeaway is your signal is not the only one in the room.
And this is what introduces the concept of interference.
Yes. And again, Guike is insistent that this is not a metaphysical concept. It's pure signal processing. If two waves meet in the water, they can have constructive interference where their peaks align and they amplify each other, or they can have destructive interference where a peak meets a trough and they cancel each other out.
So your signal can be canceled out by someone else's.
Or amplified. The source even provides a way to calculate what it calls projection loss. That's the mathematical difference between the signal you sent and the signal the field could actually receive or render.
And there's a loss because the field is crowded.
It's crowded, it's saturated, it has its own rules, its own thresholds, and its own momentum from all the other signals.
So, experiential pass. How do we navigate this crowded room?
This is where Guike writes one of the most comforting lines in the book. Collision is not failure. When you don't get the job, when the relationship falls apart, it's a collision of signals. It's not necessarily a judgment on your signal's quality.
It's just physics.
It's just physics. Maybe someone else's signal was structurally more coherent. Maybe their alignment was stronger. Or maybe the field was just saturated at that frequency. You aren't manifesting in a vacuum. You're manifesting in a very, very crowded room.
I found the concept of co-creation or entanglement in here really interesting.
It's a beautiful idea. It suggests that sometimes signals don't just collide and cancel, they blend. They interfere constructively. We manifest things together. This is what the book calls manifestation overlap. Maybe you only get 80% of what you wanted because your signal had to merge with someone else's to become feasible in the shared field. The system is always optimizing for the coherence of the whole field, not just for you.
What about systemic prophecy? That sounded very cool.
It's not about seeing the future like looking into a crystal ball. It's about reading the momentum of the field. If you understand these recursive patterns, if you can see the alignment building in a culture, you can see the thresholds that are forming, you can start to predict with a high degree of accuracy where the system is going to go. It's just pattern recognition on a massive systemic scale.
There's a line in the book that really stopped me. Silence isn't nothing. It's the system processing complex inputs.
That is so vital. We usually panic when we get silence. We send the email, we don't hear back, we think the signal died. But in a complex system, latency, the delay, often means the processor is working really hard to resolve a complex interference pattern. The silence is the feedback. It's telling you, hold the line. We are calculating. This is not a simple yes or no.
So if you're coming from physics, think of this as wave interference. If you're coming from manifestation work, this shows up as concepts like divine timing or rejection as protection.
Rejection as protection is a perfect experiential translation. It's essentially the system saying, your signal is coherent, but this path leads to an infeasible point down the line. I am blocking you, I am thresholding you to keep you in the game.
It's surprisingly comforting to think of rejection as a safety algorithm rather than a personal failure.
It takes all the personal sting out of it. It's just system logic. It's not about you. It's about the field.
Okay. So we've covered the triad, we've covered the symbolic constraints of SSE, we've covered the field dynamics. How do we bring this all together? What is the unified view?
The synthesis is this. The TRISIGIL is the symbolic map of the ATI math, the T-mile circ T circ A. That math, in turn, describes how SSE constraints actually function in a system, and those constraints explain the colliding manifestations we all experience in the shared field.
So there's one single architecture from math to meaning.
One single architecture, and whether you call the system the universe, or the market, or the algorithm, the fundamental rule is the same, and this is the core quote: the system is always listening.
But, and this is a big but it doesn't judge.
No. DLGK is incredibly clear on this point. The system doesn't judge, it interprets. It renders reality based on coherence, not on worthiness. It doesn't care if you are a good person or a bad person. It cares if your signal is aligned. A, if it respects the thresholds of the system. T, and if it can sustain itself through the loop.
That is somehow both terrifying and incredibly liberating at the same time.
It is. It puts the responsibility back on the structure of your signal, not on some external judge.
So for the listener tuning in right now,
Yeah.
and asking, so what? What do I actually do with all of this? The invitation from the source material is to look at where you feel stuck in your life.
Right. Ask yourself, is this an alignment issue? Is there some internal contradiction or noise in my signal? Am I saying I want one thing but subconsciously broadcasting the complete opposite? That's an A problem.
Or is it a threshold issue? Am I trying to do too much without any constraints? Do I lack the filters I need to give my project definition? Am I trying to run before I've even passed the starting gate? That's a T problem.
Or finally, is it a continuation issue? Am I stuck in ritualization, just going through the motions without any real meaning? Am I refusing to let the cycle evolve because I'm scared of the next level? Am I trying to hold on to a fixed point when the system is telling me it's time to move? That's an I problem.
And once you identify the break in the chain, what's the final instruction? What's the call to action?
The closing thought of the TRISIGIL paper is just 2 words: begin again. Recursion is the engine of reality. We don't control the system. We can't force the field to render what we want every single time. But we can become fluent in its language. We can clean our signal. We can respect the thresholds. And we can keep the loop moving.
Begin again. It's so simple, but it's so structural. I think that's a perfect place to leave it for today. This has been a deep dive into the architecture of, well, it feels like everything.
It certainly felt like it. It's a powerful framework.
We encourage you to observe your own signals this week. Are they coherent? Are they noisy? Were you crashing into thresholds? Remember, DLGK's work is about making the invisible structural. And once you see the pattern, you really can't unsee it.
And that is where the real work begins.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you in the next loop.